I didn't think I did anything wrong. I only joked that my husband was too old to satisfy me. But then the bank machine swallowed my card, and I realized he hadn't just left. He had prepared. My name is Lyra Anselm. I am 34, and I swear I did not mean anything by it when I called my husband too old to satisfy me. It was supposed to be funny, a little remark to make people laugh, but somehow it turned into this disaster. Marcus, my husband of 11 years, has always been steady, quiet, almost boring in how predictable he is. He works in logistics, comes home at the same time, eats dinner, helps the kids with homework, and goes to bed early. People call that reliable, but to me it always felt like he was fading into the background of life. I work as a receptionist at a dental clinic. Nothing glamorous, but at least it gives me stories to tell. That is where I met Ethan, the young trainer from the gym next door. He made me feel noticed, alive, like I was not just a wife and a mother, but still a woman someone could look at. I told myself it was harmless, just coffee breaks and compliments, but part of me wanted Marcus to notice the difference, to see how stale he had become. At a family dinner one night, with my sister and his mother present, the joke slipped out. I laughed, saying Marcus was too old to keep up with me anymore, and that maybe I needed someone younger. The table went silent except for nervous chuckles, and Marcus's face turned pale. He left early with the kids, while I insisted everyone was being dramatic. My parents told me later that I had gone too far, but I thought Marcus would get over it like he always did. What I did not know was that instead of sulking, he was planning. And when my bank card stopped working and I came home to half-empty closets, I realized just how much planning he had done. It started at home, as most things do, quiet and ordinary, before it turned into something I never expected. Marcus had cooked dinner, as he often did, because he claimed he was better at it. I never argued. Let him stand at the stove like some hero. It just made me look like I had a man who cared. My sister Clara was there that night with her partner, and of course his mother Nora insisted on joining too. The kids were at the table, Sophie chattering about her school project, and Liam trying to sneak extra bread rolls when no one was watching. I wanted the night to feel warm, lively, like a picture of a happy family, but Marcus ruined it with his silence. He sat there listening, answering when spoken to, never taking the lead. To me it was embarrassing. I wanted him to show energy, to prove he was more than just routine. So, I filled the silence myself. I told a story about a patient at work who made me laugh, and Clara laughed along, but Marcus just nodded. I could feel myself getting irritated, and that's when I slipped into my usual role, the entertainer, the one who says things to make everyone laugh. I said Marcus always double-checked everything, that he was so cautious he even measured how much salt to put on his food. Everyone chuckled, even Nora, though her smile was tight. Marcus kept eating, but I wanted more. I wanted to see if I could get him to break his shell. So I added that he was practically an old man already, too tired for anything fun, always acting like bedtime was his favorite part of the day. Clara gave me a look across the table, like I should stop, but I waved it off. It was just a joke. Sophie asked what I meant, and I brushed it away, saying Daddy liked his naps more than adventures. People laughed again, though it was that awkward kind of laugh that makes you wonder if they're laughing with you or at you. Marcus put down his fork slowly and asked if I was finished. His voice was calm, too calm. I smirked and said I was only warming up. That's when Nora spoke up, saying I should be careful with my words. Her tone cut through the air, sharp and cold. I rolled my eyes and said Marcus knew I was joking, that he always played the victim when I teased him. Marcus excused himself from the table after that, saying he was tired. He kissed Sophie on the head, told Liam to finish his vegetables, and walked down the hall. Clara stared at me, whispered that I had gone too far, but I just laughed and said he would get over it by morning. After dinner, when everyone left, I found him in the guest room with a pillow and blanket. I asked if he was seriously moving in there over a harmless joke. He said he needed space. I told him he was embarrassing me, that he made me look like the bad guy. He didn't respond, just turned off the light and rolled over. I stood there in the doorway, angry that he would treat me like I had committed some crime when all I had done was liven up the evening. The next morning, he made breakfast for the kids as if nothing had happened, helping Sophie with her shoes and Liam with his backpack. He said goodbye to them, kissed their heads, and left for work without even looking at me. I tried to call Clara later, hoping she would back me up, but she only said maybe Marcus deserved more respect than I gave him. That stung. I told her she was always too quick to take his side. She sighed and said she didn't want to be in the middle. That silence from her felt like betrayal. My parents, when I complained, told me Marcus was too sensitive, that men of his age always got insecure when women teased them. Their words soothed me, made me feel justified. I told myself I had done nothing wrong, that Marcus was punishing me for being honest. But when I passed by the guest room that night and saw him working on his laptop, typing quickly and closing it when I entered, a strange unease settled in my chest. I asked what he was doing, and he said work. His voice was calm again, steady, like he had drawn a line I couldn't see. I laughed, said he was secretive, and walked away, pretending it didn't matter. But it did matter. The look in his eyes told me something had shifted, something I couldn't name. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe my joke had opened a door I couldn't close. Work became my safe place after that dinner. At the clinic, I was the one people noticed. Patients smiled at me, co-workers asked about my weekend, and no one sat in silence making me feel like I was dragging a corpse through life. Next door at the gym, Ethan was always there with his easy grin and his way of leaning in just close enough to make me feel alive again. He was 31, younger, fitter, the kind of man who looked at me like I was not just somebody's wife or mother, but a woman who still had something to offer. It started with casual chats at the coffee shop. He'd ask if I wanted a latte after work, and I'd say yes, telling myself it was harmless. He complimented my new haircut, noticed my shoes, even joked that I had more energy than half the younger women in his classes. I would laugh, and inside it felt like a spark. At home, Marcus noticed my late arrivals. He asked why I was always staying out. I told him I had extra work, that the clinic was short-staffed, and he needed to stop being paranoid. He asked once if I was seeing someone. I laughed in his face and said only insecure men asked questions like that. He went silent again, which made me angry. I wanted a fight, some proof that he cared, but instead he gave me nothing but calm. The kids sensed the shift. Sophie asked why Daddy ate in the guest room now. I said he snored too much, but the way she looked at me made me feel judged. Even Liam, too young to understand, grew quiet at dinner when Marcus and I spoke barely a word. I told myself it was temporary, that Marcus was sulking and would eventually snap out of it. But then Nora came over uninvited one evening. She sat in the living room, her face stern, and told me she had seen the way I spoke to her son at the dinner. She said I humiliated him in front of everyone, and that a man could only take so much. I smiled tightly and said Marcus needed to grow thicker skin. She shook her head and warned me that I was digging a hole I wouldn't be able to climb out of. I rolled my eyes after she left, but her words lingered longer than I wanted to admit. At work, Ethan filled the space. He asked if Marcus appreciated me, and I told him Marcus barely looked at me anymore. He smirked and said Marcus was a fool. That smirk became a little lifeline, something I replayed in my head when I was angry at home. I started dressing nicer for work, fixing my hair differently, putting on lipstick before leaving the house. Marcus noticed. He asked why I put in so much effort for patients when I barely tried at home. I told him he was imagining things. I accused him of being controlling, of trying to make me feel guilty for having standards. He went quiet again. Only this time he looked at me for a long moment, like he was memorizing me. That unsettled me more than anything. One night, I left my phone on the counter while putting the kids to bed. When I came back, Marcus was sitting there, the phone face down. He didn't say a word, but I knew he had seen the message from Ethan. It was nothing explicit, just a line about how I made the gym brighter when I walked in. But the meaning was obvious. I accused him of snooping, of violating my privacy. He said he hadn't touched anything, just saw the screen light up. His calm tone made me furious. I wanted him to scream, to call me out, to give me the drama I could twist back on him. But instead, he stood, said he had work to do, and left me standing there with my heart racing. I called Clara that night, expecting sympathy, but she sounded tired of my stories. She said maybe I should think about how Marcus felt, that not everything had to be a joke at his expense. I snapped that she was always on his side, that she couldn't stand me being the center of attention. She grew quiet and said she didn't want to talk about it anymore. I hung up angry, but inside I felt abandoned. Even my sister was pulling away. My parents, when I told them Marcus was being controlling, dismissed it. My mother said men always get insecure when they hit their 40s. My father said Marcus should be grateful to have me. Their words soothed me, gave me permission to keep doing what I was doing. I convinced myself Marcus was the problem, not me. The following week, Ethan asked if I wanted to grab a drink after work. I said yes without hesitation. At the bar, he leaned in close and said I deserved better, someone younger, someone who could keep up. I laughed and agreed, feeling bold, invincible. But when I came home, Marcus was waiting at the table. He asked how my day was. I said fine. He asked if I had anything I wanted to tell him. I told him he was acting like a detective and needed to stop. He nodded slowly, like he had expected that answer, and slid a folder into the drawer beside him. He didn't look angry. He looked calm, prepared, almost finished with me. That look stayed with me all night, heavier than any fight we had ever had. The family dinner at the restaurant was supposed to be easy. I thought if I got everyone out of the house, away from the heavy silence Marcus carried around, things would feel normal again. I booked a table, invited Clara, my parents, and of course Nora, because she would never forgive us if she was left out. Sophie and Liam came too, dressed neatly, excited to order their favorite meals. The restaurant was warm and buzzing, filled with voices and clinking glasses, and I told myself this was my chance to shine. From the start, Marcus was quiet. He ordered water, barely touched the bread basket, and sat there like a shadow. I filled the silence the way I always did, telling funny stories about work, about Ethan's gym classes, though I left his name out, and even about how hard it was to manage everything when Marcus checked out. My parents laughed along. Clara gave me cautious looks, and Nora sat stiff as a board, clearly irritated. I couldn't help myself. I wanted the spotlight. I wanted people to laugh. So I leaned back in my chair, smirked, and said Marcus was getting too old to satisfy me. The words rolled out smooth, like I had rehearsed them, and the effect was instant. The table went silent. My father cleared his throat. My mother looked down at her napkin. Clara's eyes widened in shock. Sophie asked what I meant, and I brushed her off quickly, saying Daddy liked bedtime more than fun. The adults gave strained laughs, but the damage was done. Marcus froze, his face pale, his jaw tight. He didn't shout, didn't argue. He simply put his fork down and stared at the table for a long moment. The silence around us felt like a weight pressing down. I tried to laugh, to lighten it, saying he knew I was joking, but no one followed me this time. Even Clara whispered under her breath that I had gone too far. Nora's voice came sharp and cold, saying I had humiliated her son in front of his children, and that shame like this didn't wash off. I rolled my eyes, said everyone was overreacting, that Marcus should learn to laugh at himself, but the atmosphere never recovered. Marcus excused himself before the main dishes arrived. He told the kids it was time to go. They protested, but he insisted gently, and they followed him, their small hands clinging to his. He paid the bill quietly and left without looking back. I sat there, humiliated but angry, convinced he had overplayed it to make me look cruel. My parents told me in low voices that maybe I should be more careful, that the joke was a step too far. I told them Marcus was being dramatic, that I was just trying to keep the evening lively. Clara didn't say much more, just shook her head like she had given up on me. When I got home later, Marcus was already in the guest room with the door closed. I knocked, asked if he was seriously going to punish me over a harmless comment. He said from inside that it wasn't harmless, not to him, not to the children. His voice was steady, almost cold. I told him he was embarrassing me, making me look like the villain. He said I had done that myself. I wanted to argue, to drag him into a fight I could twist into my victory, but he stayed silent. That silence terrified me more than shouting ever could. Over the next few days, the house felt split in two. He handled the kids with tenderness, packed lunches, checked homework, drove them to school. With me, he was polite but distant, speaking only when necessary. I tried to provoke him, saying maybe Ethan could give me the attention I needed. He didn't react, not even a flinch. It was like talking to a wall, only this wall was slowly moving further away, taking everything with it. The kids noticed. Sophie asked me why Daddy never laughed anymore. I told her he was tired, that he needed to loosen up. But her eyes filled with doubt, and I hated that look. Liam started clinging to Marcus more, following him around the house, leaving me sitting alone at the table. Clara stopped answering my texts altogether. When I finally called, she said she didn't want to be in the middle, that she was tired of hearing me defend myself. I told her she was abandoning me, but she just said she couldn't keep pretending I was right. Even my parents grew quiet, avoiding the topic whenever I tried to complain. Only Nora was loud, her disapproval sharp every time I saw her. She said Marcus deserved respect, and that if I couldn't give it, he should find a way to protect himself. I laughed in her face, but inside, unease was growing. The cliffhanger came one night when Marcus came home later than usual. He set his briefcase down, looked at me across the kitchen, and asked if I had anything new to say. I told him he was ridiculous, that I wouldn't apologize for being myself. He nodded, calm as ever, and said in that same steady tone that some things couldn't be undone. Then he went upstairs, leaving me frozen in the kitchen, unsure if he was talking about the marriage, the family, or something else entirely. That sentence lingered like a shadow, darker than any silence he had given me before. A week after the restaurant disaster, I decided I needed to reclaim the story. People were starting to look at me like I was cruel. Even Clara had turned cold, and I couldn't stand the idea of being the villain. So I arranged a night out with a few friends, dragged Clara along despite her hesitation, and picked a trendy restaurant where I could make my case. I wanted laughter, support, validation that I was not the one tearing things apart. When we sat down, drinks in hand, I launched into my version of events. I told them Marcus had been sulking for weeks, hiding in the guest room like a child, refusing to even talk. I said I had made one little joke about him being too old to keep up, and suddenly he was acting like I had destroyed his life. I painted myself as the exhausted wife, carrying the family while my husband moped. A couple of the friends nodded politely, but the laughter I craved wasn't there. One asked gently if maybe I'd gone too far in front of the children. I brushed it off, saying kids forget everything, and that humor was part of marriage. Clara sat in silence, arms folded, eyes on her drink. I pushed harder, telling them Marcus was insecure, that he had always been older and slower, and that maybe I deserved someone who could match my energy. I even joked that younger men seemed to notice me more these days. A couple of them laughed awkwardly, but I could feel the shift. It wasn't admiration, it was discomfort. Clara finally spoke, saying I sounded cruel, that I wasn't taking responsibility for anything. Her words stung because she had always been on my side before. I snapped back that she was jealous, that she had never liked how people paid more attention to me. She sighed, said nothing, and leaned back in her chair, clearly done with me. That silence felt heavier than her words. I turned to my friends again, trying to recover, but the energy was gone. I called Marcus controlling, said he was making me look bad by keeping his distance, and claimed he was too cowardly to fight for his wife. One friend muttered that maybe he was just done fighting, and that shut me up for a moment. I hated the pity in their eyes. When I got home that night, Marcus was in the living room with papers spread across the table. He didn't hide them when I walked in. He asked if I had a good night. I said fine. He asked if I had told everyone how pathetic he was. I said they already knew. He didn't react, just gathered the papers into a neat stack and slid them into a folder. I demanded to know what he was doing. He said he was preparing. The way he said it, calm, flat, final, sent a chill down my spine. The next morning I called my mother, looking for reassurance. She said Marcus was too old-fashioned, that men of his age often couldn't keep up with younger wives, and that maybe I was right to expect more. My father muttered something about Marcus needing to stop sulking, but his voice lacked conviction. Even they were starting to pull away. Nora, however, was not quiet. She called me directly and told me her son had every right to protect himself from me. She said I had crossed lines I didn't even understand yet. I hung up on her, furious, but her words replayed in my head all day. The kids grew quieter too. Sophie clung to Marcus, asking to do her homework with him. Liam followed him around the house like a shadow. I tried to pull them back toward me, but they slipped away, drawn to his calm steadiness. It infuriated me. I told Marcus he was turning them against me. He said he didn't have to. They were watching everything on their own. That made me snap, yelling that he was pathetic, too old, and that if I wanted someone younger, I could have him. He just looked at me with those calm eyes and said nothing. His silence made me feel like I was the one unraveling. Then came the moment that shook me. I went out again with Clara, desperate to pull her back to my side. We sat together at another restaurant, me insisting Marcus was bluffing, that he wouldn't dare leave, that he was too dependent on me. Clara just looked at me sadly and said she didn't think I understood what he was doing. Before I could demand what she meant, a man walked up to the table. He asked my name, confirmed it, and handed me a thick envelope. My heart pounded as he walked away without another word. Clara looked at me with wide eyes as I tore it open. Inside were legal documents, divorce papers, custody petitions, financial disclosures, evidence lists. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped them. Clara whispered that she had warned me. I laughed, forced and brittle, saying Marcus was bluffing, that he wouldn't go through with it. But inside, panic spread like fire. He wasn't bluffing. He had been planning all along. The calm, the silence, the folders. This was what it had all been leading to. And now, with the weight of the papers in my hands, I realized I wasn't in control anymore. Marcus was. The morning after I got served, I sat at the kitchen table, with the papers spread out in front of me, like they were some foreign language. Custody petitions, bank records, statements from people I knew, Clara, even Nora, all lined up in neat, cold print. Marcus moved around the house, as if nothing had changed. He poured cereal for Liam, packed Sophie's lunch, tied their shoes. He kissed them both on the head before school, calm as ever. I waited until the door shut behind them before I snapped. I asked him if this was his idea of a joke, dragging lawyers into our marriage. He said simply that it was not a joke, it was a plan. I laughed, sharp and defensive, and told him no court would take him seriously over a few little jokes. He didn't argue. He went to the counter, picked up a thick folder, and laid it on the table in front of me. My stomach turned as I opened it. Inside were screenshots of texts between me and Ethan, with dates, times, even little emojis highlighted. There were bank statements showing my late-night spending, matched against the times I told Marcus I was at work. There were notes about the family dinner, the restaurant, every public moment where I had mocked him. Witness statements, too. Clara's name was there, along with a friend from that night out. He had documented everything. I felt heat rising in my chest, but instead of admitting fear, I went on the attack. I accused him of spying, of stalking me, of trying to twist reality to make me look bad. He said calmly that he didn't twist anything. He just recorded the truth. I told him Ethan meant nothing, that it was harmless, just fun. He said the texts spoke for themselves. I tried to guilt him, saying he was traumatizing the kids by turning our marriage into a courtroom battle. He said the kids deserved stability, not lies, and that the court would see who provided that. His steady voice made me feel like I was shrinking, but I still refused to give in. I shouted that he was weak, that a real man would fight for his wife instead of hiding behind lawyers. He looked at me for a long moment before saying he wasn't fighting for me anymore. He was fighting for them, and for his own peace, Those words cut through me like a blade. Later that day, I called my mother, sobbing, begging her to say he was overreacting. She went quiet after I told her what was in the folder. She said maybe I should think about how far I had pushed him. My father muttered that Marcus had always been steady, and if he was going this far, it meant he had already made up his mind. I felt abandoned. Clara didn't even answer my call. Nora, though, didn't hesitate. She came over that evening, hugged Marcus in the doorway, and told him he was doing the right thing. She looked at me once coldly, before leaving with the kids to get ice cream. When they came back laughing and sticky-fingered, I felt like an outsider in my own home. That night, I tried again to argue with Marcus. I told him he was ruining us, that no one would believe his story. He quietly pulled out another set of papers, emails from the clinic showing I hadn't stayed late the nights I claimed to. He had checked. He had proof. I felt my world closing in. I tried to spin it again, saying stress had made me slip, that it was his constant coldness that drove me toward Ethan. He didn't even respond. He just gathered the papers, slid them neatly into the folder, and placed it back in his briefcase. I couldn't stand his silence, so I yelled louder, but it was like shouting at stone. The next day, when the kids were at school, Marcus sat me down at the table again. He said clearly that he was filing for majority custody. He said he had documented a pattern of humiliation, neglect, and lies, and his lawyer was confident. I tried to say Gareth meant nothing, but Marcus corrected me, his eyes steady. Ethan. He already knew the details I thought I had hidden. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was laugh bitterly, accusing him of planning this for years. He said he hadn't planned it, but he had prepared once he realized I would never stop. That night, as I lay awake in the bed alone, the silence of the house pressed down on me. I thought of every time I laughed at him, every time I rolled my eyes, every cruel little remark I passed off as humor. I told myself I was still in control, but deep down, I knew it was a lie. The cliffhanger came the following weekend, when Marcus packed the kids' overnight bags. I asked where he was going. He said to Nora's for the weekend. I asked if he was coming back. He looked at me with those unreadable eyes and said he would come back for his things. Then he walked out the door with Sophie and Liam, leaving me in the doorway with my heart pounding, the house already feeling too empty, and the folder still sitting heavy on the kitchen table. The day of the court hearing felt like stepping into someone else's life. I still believed I could talk my way out of it, that Marcus was bluffing, that a judge would see through his calm act and realize he was just a man too fragile to take a joke. I dressed in my best outfit, painted on confidence with my makeup, and told myself charm would carry me through like it always had. Marcus arrived in a plain grey suit, looking steady, almost boring, but beside him his lawyer carried a binder so thick it looked like a weapon. When the session began, his lawyer laid everything out in neat order. Screenshots of my texts with Ethan, time-stamped coffee receipts, emails proving I hadn't been at work when I claimed I was, bank statements showing late-night charges, even statements from Clara and Nora, written out and signed, describing how I mocked Marcus at gatherings. They had details about the restaurant, about the too old to satisfy me comment, about the kids hearing everything. Each page felt like a door closing on me. When it was my turn, I tried to explain. I said Marcus was too sensitive, that my comments were only jokes, that humor was how I kept things lively. I said Ethan meant nothing, just harmless attention. But the judge's face stayed blank, and Marcus's lawyer kept turning pages, matching my excuses to the evidence. Every denial I gave was countered with another document, another witness, another date and time. My parents sat in the back. My mother avoided my eyes. My father stared at the floor. Clara didn't even come. Nora sat straight, her face calm, but her eyes full of quiet victory. I wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that everyone had turned against me, but the courtroom was heavy with silence. The judge spoke firmly, saying actions have consequences, and that children notice more than parents think. She said Marcus had demonstrated consistency, stability, and documentation. She said I had shown recklessness and disregard for respect. The ruling came swift and sharp. Marcus was granted primary custody of Sophie and Liam. I would have visitation rights, scheduled and supervised if necessary. The financial ruling cut deeper. The joint accounts had already been secured under Marcus's name with court approval. The house would be sold, the proceeds divided, but his personal savings and retirement funds were protected because he had moved them legally before filing. I tried to argue, saying I was their mother, that I deserved more, that a few cruel jokes shouldn't erase everything. The judge looked at me with no expression and said this wasn't about jokes, it was about patterns. When the gavel fell, I felt like my chest was hollow. Marcus didn't smile, didn't gloat. He stood, shook his lawyer's hand, and walked out with the quiet dignity of someone who had already won long before the judge spoke. I followed him into the hallway, desperate. I asked if he was happy now, if he was proud to destroy his own family. He turned to me once, his face calm but his eyes cold, and said it wasn't him who destroyed anything. Then he walked away. My parents left without much more than a pat on the shoulder. My mother's hug was brief. My father said nothing. Clara texted later saying she couldn't watch me tear myself apart anymore. Nora passed by holding Sophie and Liam's backpacks in her hands, walking beside Marcus as if this had been inevitable all along. She didn't even glance at me. When I finally made it home, the house felt hollow. Closets half empty, drawers cleared, toys missing from the living room. On the counter sat Marcus's house key, laid neatly on top of a folded note that was completely blank. No words, no explanations, just silence. I grabbed my wallet, desperate for some proof that I still had control. At the store, I swiped my card. Declined. Tried again. Declined. The cashier looked at me with pity as if she knew. I walked out empty-handed, the reality pressing down like a weight I couldn't shake. Back home, the silence was unbearable. Every room echoed with absence. Sophie's drawings were gone from the fridge, Liam's shoes from the hallway. I stood in the middle of the living room staring at the empty spaces where life had been, and for the first time, I realized it was over. Marcus hadn't yelled, hadn't fought, hadn't broken. He had waited, documented, and taken everything quietly, legally, completely. And I, the one who thought I was clever, the one who laughed too loud, the one who thought words were harmless, was left with nothing but my own echo. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching, were watching, were watching, were watching, were watching, were watching.